Good afternoon, my American Studies 140 students. This is Professor Donald Earl Collins again. It is now week 2. It is May 17th, 2021. Thank you for bearing with me through week 1, through trying to do online threaded discussions, introducing yourselves to each other and to me. Conversing about stuff that you watched and or listened to and or read from last week in discussions. Thank you especially to folks who were on time and followed the guidelines of getting their posts done by Friday evening slash very, very early Saturday morning, and giving folks 2 full days more or less to respond to your post. Appreciate it. You guys pretty much had the reactions you needed to have to the video, to podcasts, to the things that you've read, and making connections to your own experiences to DC, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you for that. Just want to have a few words about that, about your upcoming project proposals that are due at the end of week 2 on May the 23rd, about the class in general. So let's see, first with your discussions. Generally, I would say they were fine. They were more than fine. I would say they were somewhere in the neighborhood of between pretty good and very good in terms of your analysis, in terms, especially just being able to tell me what was in the stuff you watched, any insights you might have had, any critiques, those sorts of things. Now, understand, first and foremost, that critiques do not have to be negative. I understand that in this country we tend to think everything in terms of critique has got to be negative, but it doesn't have to be. It can be positive too. You can say this podcast was eye-opening because it provided critical analysis that debunks the myths of America's ideals and origins, kinds of thing. That's a positive statement, even if it is an indictment on American education, K-12, or indictment on American mythology in general, what have you. But it's still positive. So critiques don't interpret everything in such literal terms. I've it's just interesting to me that as my son gets ready to graduate from high school, right, in the next couple of weeks, that he take a lot of things literally too. And I've noticed that with younger folks now that they tend to think things. If I say do a critique, they think negative and they think literally they're just critiquing the actual podcast or actual film as if you're movie critics, when the reality is asking you to critique based on what you've read, based on what you're watching, based on what you're listening to, based on on the subject matter too. So it's positive, different layers to it. It's not literally just the thing you were watching or listening to. So I just add a couple of things real quick regarding beyond just that. The course is about understanding DC's history and culture, and understanding where DC lies within the span of U.S. history, within the span of, quite frankly, I guess, Southern history, history of African Americans, the history of white supremacy, the history of whiteness, the history of a whole variety of different folks as we move through the course, the cultures of such. And so when I asked you about, the nature of DC's culture at the turn of the 19th century, about what the implications are of George Washington's stance and versus George Washington's what he actually did, those kinds of things. I'm asking you to think about what kind of culture DC has. Is it based on slavery? Is it Southern in nature? Is it U.S. in nature? Is it very much white supremacist in nature? Is it one that sort of combines a little bit of all of it? It's certainly not urban yet because the city is still being built, right? So maybe there are a few towns around, like Georgetown's its own separate town, that sort of thing. But until 1871, Washington, D.C. isn't even one city. It's basically a combination of plantations, swampland, forest, Washington City, Georgetown, a town, Washington County, Maryland. It's a little bit of everything. So when I ask you about that, it's within that larger context. So you really want to do some of the readings. You don't have to do the readings to do the discussion, but if you want to go to a deeper level analysis, you do have to do the readings too, just as a reminder. And then finally, I would say for those of you who did submit your stuff after, say 1 o'clock a.m. on Saturday, May the 15th, to think that, that yes, you technically are not late in the sense that I will take points off per se for handing in, for submitting your post Sunday evening. But really, how can you have a discussion of what you posted with other students, with me, if you're posting Sunday evenings? You can't. It becomes busy work for you, and quite frankly, it showed the quality of work. A 5 or 6 sentence post is not the same as spending a couple of paragraphs, 300 words or so, trying to break down what you got out of something and what the implications are. It's not the same. And so that reduces your quality of work and certainly reduces the opportunity for people to evaluate your work and for a conversation, which is what this is supposed to be. So if you really want full credit for your posts, please do them on Fridays, like the syllabus actually says, right? You want full credit. You'll get most of the credit. I'm not gonna ding you and give you a 0 or half a grade or anything like that. But the folks who got their stuff in, I haven't graded them yet, but I imagine that their grades will probably be somewhere in the A to A minus range. And for those of you who are late, unless it was really good, it's probably going to be less than that. So, just so you know, get your stuff in by Friday so that people have a chance to discuss it, so that everything's done by Sunday, and you get full credit for everything. So and just as a quick reminder for folks as well, if we're not using terms like the white community or the whites or other terms to describe, white Americans, white people, right, white folks, then probably shouldn't do the same thing for African Americans or for Native Americans. Don't overgeneralize. Don't say the natives. Don't say the blacks. Don't say the black community. Unless you literally mean the black community on U Street Shaw or the black community in Anacostia. In that context, it makes sense, but in any other context, you're making an entire group of folks who have different views on lots of things a monolith. So I would avoid that. All right, that's enough for week 1. Week 2, you have, in addition to discussions, you have to put together a 1 to 2 page proposal on what projects you might want to work on for this course. And you're not limited in terms of textual versus other kinds of projects that are more creative in nature. Syllabus goes over this in great detail um, over over the variety of projects. You can do slideshows, you can do a literal collage of pictures and explaining what these pictures mean. You can do a Spotify playlist of DC related and DMV related music. You can do a video, just a regular video presentation about how communities change because of gentrification, or because of this development project, or because of urban renewal, or because of the '68 uprising and riots, or because of whatever it is, right? Something other, you can do spoken word, you can do rap, you can sing, great lyrics to a song, whatever it is that hits your fancy in terms of your creative wheelhouse, and not just write a paper or write an executive summary, which are different. And I can go over in more detail as we get closer to weeks 5 and 6 when those things are due. But for now, I want you to come up with an idea for your project. I would prefer if you didn't just use the syllabus as your guide, that you pick other stuff that might be interesting to you. The only things that are truly off limits are, let's look at the history of Georgetown University. All right, that's off limits. I had several students just do Georgetown because it was low-hanging fruit, because that's the only place in the city they knew outside of Tinleytown and Spring Valley, where AU is. And I'd prefer you not to do that. I had too many projects on that the first 2 semesters I taught this course, so that's off limits. The other thing is monuments for the sake of monuments, right? This course is life inside a monument, about people and communities, and how DC is made up of everyday people, not just monuments. The only thing that would meet the criteria in terms of doing this would be what do monuments mean to different groups in DC. What did they mean, say, 100 years ago when they were first open, like, say, the Lincoln Memorial, and what do they mean now to DC residents? But that would be kind of hard for you to do, since Despite the idea that the pandemic is over in this country, according to the CDC, as of this past Thursday or Friday, it's not really over. It's just that there are more people being vaccinated than there are people catching COVID at this point, and by a fairly wide margin, which is great, but it's not over, right? No vaccine's perfect. And so, therefore, there might be some restrictions even after early June. So your likelihood that you're going to be able to go out on the street, just interview anybody, in light of the confusing CDC guidelines and different locales within the DMV having different rules around masking outdoors, masking indoors, and all those other things, that's probably too much to chew on. And so you really want to be able to narrow down your project to something reasonable that you can do in 10 minutes, right? If you're doing it individually, 10 to 15 if you're doing it collectively. This is also the week, by the way, that you decide whether or not you want to do a group project with another person in the class, or whether you want to do one on your own. I'm assuming all of you are going to do individual projects, which is perfectly fine. The group project idea is there in case you want to do a group project. You don't have to. And I don't want you to feel pressure to doing a group project just for sake of it, especially with some of you still in China, some of you in Europe, some of you in South America, some of you in DC, some of you on the other side of the country. It gets kind of hard to do these kinds of things. So do the best you can. Like I said, the syllabus gives you quite a variety of ideas, but it's not inclusive and it's not hardly exhaustive at all. Barely scratches the surface. There's something like 93 distinct communities just in DC alone, 93 neighborhoods. You throw in Montgomery County and its different permutations. You throw in Prince George's County, PG County, and its permutations. Parts of Northern Virginia, Fairfax County, Arlington County, City of Alexandria, City of Manassas, Prince William County, the exurbs in Maryland, including Howard County. Some people even include Baltimore City and Baltimore County as part of the greater DMV. That's a lot to put in there. So you have a lot of choices. You are not limited to what's in the syllabus. But I would seriously suggest that you read the syllabus thoroughly. You look at the sample executive summary or summaries I think I have under content, and also the sample project proposals that are under there, so that you get a sense of what it is I'm looking for, right? The syllabus gives you guidelines too, but it should be all 1 and 2 pages. Give me some sense of what it's going to take to do this work, some sense of what you think it will take for you to get an A, some sense of what the topic is, some sense of what the resources you might need to do it, and you'll be fine with that. It is an ungraded assignment. All right. The main thing that I have to do is to approve or disapprove of your assignment, or to tell you how to tweak it. Right. Those are the things that I will do when I get those in and start looking at them for next week. So that's your main thing to do, in addition to the week 2 discussion. The readings, the videos that you're looking at. Duke Ellington's Washington, D.C. If you can get access to the interactive map and discussions and video and pictures around the 1968 uprising riots and how that's a breaking point in terms of D.C., the D.C. that we see today versus the D.C. that existed before the uprising riots in 1968. Please don't just simply refer to them as riots, because it is an uprising too, right? After all, it was set off by Martin Luther King's assassination, police lethality, not just brutality, lethality, killing people, right? Those kinds of things. So that's all in all what I wanted to cover for this week. It's an important week because it sets the tone for how you're going to go about your project for the remainder of the semester. Half your grade in the course is the project. 30% is discussion, 20% are your reflections, which are due weeks 3 and 7, but it's the project and the discussions are 80% of your grade. So keep up with this. You're going to be fine. So, all right. That's it for this week. Email me if you have any questions. Thanks.